Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Have any of you ever wandered into another world? Like a room not connected to reality, for example. Maybe it was much bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. I had an experience like that once. It was while I was camping in Canada. I was near the Rockies, hiking with a group of friends. It was still only around noon. The sun was in the sky and there was not a single cloud for miles. We happened to find a cave, tucked away behind some trees. My friends and I felt something from inside the cave. It's the feeling you get when something that hates you is staring at you. I remember feeling extremely unnerved, but that only made my urge to explore the cave greater. I tried to convince my friends to go in with me. They refused, but I, ever the brave soul, donned my phone's flashlight and decided to go in. They said they'd give me 10 minutes. The cave was relatively easy to navigate, almost like it was man-made. There weren't many obstructions along the path, and it was wide enough for me to walk through comfortably. But then something changed. I reached the end of the cave and found many words carved into the stone. I only managed to read one before my phone, which had 70% battery, died. It said, "Don't look at the sun." I walked back the way I came, the only way I could possibly go. It should have occurred to me that the path I was walking on was somehow different, but I choked it up to having no light. In any case, I made it out of the cave. My friends weren't there anymore. And the sky, well, the blue sky was now blood red. It was definitely the same spot, but the sky was different. My friends were gone, and the forest looked very not alive. The grass, the trees, everything had these black, diseased splotches all over them. There were insects all over the place, flies, centipedes, etc. No spiders or worms, nothing good. I was freaking out. I tried getting my phone to work, but I couldn't get it to turn on. I looked up and I saw the sun. It was a blindingly bright crimson orb. I found myself staring at it, even though it hurt my eyes. But I ended up distracted by something in my peripheral vision. I couldn't quite place what it was, but I noped out of there. I ran back into the cave almost immediately, tripping on rocks, and rushed back to the dead end. And then nothing. Just nothing. I heard my friends calling my name. I ran towards them and noticed the path was much smoother. When I got out, I immediately asked them if they saw anything screwed up. I was covered in scratches and marks from hurting myself on the rocks in the other cave. I checked the power button on my phone, and sure enough, it worked. I felt really weird after. I made up some excuse about feeling sick and went back to our camp and just stayed by myself the whole day. The next night I tried to go back, dragging another friend with me with 2 flashlights, but we couldn't get it to work. That being said, the writing on the cave wall was still there, and was probably the only thing that made me accept that this was real and not some messed up psychotic trip. Don't look at the sun. Help us. I want to go home. Where are they? They're following me. I can't go back. Why? Things like that. From the writing, several things became clear. 1, I wasn't the first person to see the other side. 2, it seemed a lot of people who did see the other side never came back. 3, and there was something on the other side stalking them. Possibly some kind of predator, like the screwed-up bizarro world version of a mountain lion, perhaps? I don't know. But there was more than one, according to the writings on the wall. I considered trying to get through again, but I decided against it. I'm brave, but not that brave. I know that there was something evil about that other sun. It was hypnotic. I was on the other side for less than 15 minutes. Most of that time was spent inside the cave trying to get my phone to turn back on. I was only outside, under the red sky, for like 2 minutes. That sun, as far as I could gather from the writing on the wall, was connected somehow to whatever predators stalked the people who got stuck there. It seems like staring at the sun, for whatever reason, I don't know. Wakes them up, summons them. Anything to do with the predators cannot be confirmed. I never actually saw one. But I will say this. That feeling, the feeling of something that hates you, staring at you, cursing your name, wishing you dead. That feeling was so intense when I looked at the red sun. It was partially what made me freeze up and stare.
I know you weren't there for a very long time, but did it seem earthly to you, or like a whole different dimension?
It looked like a twisted version of Earth. The cave was much more rough on the other side, and the rocks were sharper. The sky, as I said, was blood red. There were trees and grass, but they were covered in black spots. The whole area had a sickly feel to it. If I had to describe it with a simile, I'd say it was like the Earth caught the flu. It felt like I was in the same place physically, but looking at it through a different lens. It was otherworldly, but I could still tell it was Earth. Does that make sense? Sorry if my answer is all over the place.
I found a stick shack once while hiking an area very well known to myself. I remember calling it a witch hut in my head when I found it. I know those woods, hunter pals call me to fish them out when they've gotten lost, and that structure was never there. I did go inside, but it had the feel of an endless pit, like if I explored further I would be lost forever with no hope of finding light again. So I left. A few weeks ago I went back to the spot. Hunting season is coming up in my area. It was burnt to the ground, no other scorch marks on the trees or ground nearby. This shack was deep in the brush. Logically the fire would have spread to at least the surrounding area, but nothing. I still hike around in there, never scared. Sometimes I believe it was my own manifestation of my personal life and how dark and bleak everything was at the time and how it could get worse, but I chose to walk away. Be smart in a woods or in a weird-ass room or place anons. You're braver and more intelligent than you'd think.
Be me, 17-year-old Boy Scout, been camping and hiking all throughout my state. The lads decided to go to see the old Goat Canyon Trestle Bridge, a massive abandoned railroad line with one of the oldest freestanding wooden bridges left standing, 1840s. Get there and park in an awkward spot below a highway bridge. Have to park on a hill because of a poorly maintained road system. Start walking on tracks, find some cool abandoned coach cars covered in graffiti. Encounter the tunnels. Encounter what I've dubbed the Infini Tunnel. Looks like the tunnel's end should only be like 100 feet in front of you before you start. Hear spoopy wind whooshers. Waff. The tunnel stretches on like a funhouse hallway. All the while the exit mocks you, looking like you could sprint to it easily. Run for 3 minutes, the distance doesn't change. No joke, took us a whole hour to reach the end of it. Both running and walking. I wanted to turn around, but thought about how the same thing could happen backwards as well. We finally escape the Infini Tunnel and spend the rest of the day hiking, checking out the bridge, mines, and trains. On our way back we encountered the tunnel again. I know your tricks, you sneaky trickster. Takes us another hour to make it out. The tunnel makes us late to return to our car. Since time got twisted up, we got there at 10 a.m. and got back at 9 p.m. Someone had called the cops on our car when we finally started it up again to get out of the cold. With the lights on, they thought it looked like it fell off the highway bridge. I sat exhausted in the car, wondering WTF just happened. Ranger told the scoutmaster it's dangerous to roam around here at night and left.
The Green Children of Woolpit. 2 English chroniclers reported a story from the 12th century that the villagers of Woolpit discovered 2 children, a brother and sister, who had green skin and spoke an unknown language. Eventually their skin colour returned to normal, but the boy died shortly after being baptised. The girl grew into adulthood and learned to speak English. She explained they were from St. Martin's Land, where everything was green, and they had been tending their father's cattle when they followed the animals into a cave. Emerging from it, they found themselves in Woolpit. Many experts have tried to figure out if the story was some kind of folk tale or was based at least in part on a true story.
I can believe this one. I saw Fey folk when I was a kid. The entrance to their realm that day at least was underneath an old stone wall, part of an early medieval manor house ruin, in the park nearby. A brick big enough for a child to slip under paved the way. My dad was talking to the groundskeeper whilst I hunted for snakes in the long grass and out of sight when I saw the shimmering lights and missing brick. Brick, as in stone slab, not tiny. Beyond the wall was a kid's playground, but inside the wall was another world. Floating castles with high gardens, long green fields, rainbows and diamond lights twinkling, and little men and women going about their work, zooming in and out of these little sparkly burrows in the ground, vanishing into thin air. The women had wings. The men did not, but ran extremely quickly. I felt very strange and tingly seeing it. It was beautiful, and I'd do anything to see it again. It was the greatest encounter of anything paranormal I've ever had. When they noticed me, one of the women gasped and squeaked, possibly speaking, but due to size sounded like squeaks, rapidly in the best way I could describe, and pushed me out with her voice. I told my parents and everyone about it. No one believed me, kids and their imagination. I went back the next day. The wall was sealed up, the brick replaced, the long grass around it cut, and the groundskeeper nowhere to be seen, which was unusual. The guy disappeared. Never saw him again. That detail spooks me to this day because in some Celtic folklore about fae folk, it's said they have manservants that guard their doorways.
October 28, 2009, somewhere around 10:45 p.m., that's when I died. I was driving down the highway to my father's house for a week of visiting, and he lived in another city. I had my iPod hooked up to my radio and was just super tired, so I kept skipping slow songs to upbeat or metal songs to keep me awake. It was snowing and slippery, but it wasn't enough to keep me from going the speed limit. I took my attention off the road to change playlists. I heard loud honking and looked up. I drifted across into the oncoming lane and a semi was heading right for me. I remember thinking, you don't come back from that. I jerked the wheel, hydroplane or slip or whatever you call it on sleet. Screeching metal, headlights, extreme impact, blackness. I felt myself stop moving in the dark, weird-ass calmness. Anon, hey! I opened my eyes. What the actual hell? I'm sitting in front of my aunt from across the country and my two cousins. They're making fun of me for spacing out. I'm not listening at all. I'm too busy looking around figuring out what the actual hell. I'm in a McDonald's, in a Walmart. There's a meal in front of me. In my head I'm freaking out, but I don't know what's up, so I just kind of absorb information rather than prod. They're on holiday, which was weird because my cousins should be in school right now. We're leaving Walmart, we get to the doors. What the actual hell? Son? 999,000 out of 10 freaking out. We get outside, it's hot. What time was it, day? Year? I grab my phone from my pocket to check. It's not even my phone. August 17, 2009, 1:17 p.m. The time I cheated death. For my birthday, my parents covered my college tuition instead of buying me a car. When I go back and watch movies, the plots are slightly different. I couldn't sing along to songs anymore because lyrics or melodies have changed. My possessions were different, and I was stuck trying to figure out my new world for like 3 weeks before I finally settled in and accepted the changes. I didn't want to write it all out unless people were interested. As far as I can tell, I took over this current iteration of me cleanly. The Walmart I came to was in the city I live in normally. Belongings were different, I had a different phone, never saw my shoes before, etc. But as far as a social life, it was exactly the same. Everyone treated me the same, all my friends and family were the same for the most part. A few things repeated themselves, like I went to the same music festival in August twice. Luckily my passwords were all the same, the internet was mostly the same. I'm not really a history buff, so I only have general knowledge of past events, but the big ones like wars, crisis, terrorist attacks seem to be the same. Nothing glaringly obvious, so I'm pretty useless in that regard. Movies, TV, and songs were the ones that mostly messed with me the most. The Paranormal Activity movie I saw in the theaters back in 2008 ended with cops shooting the girl. She didn't live. It was also a wide release, but it definitely came out, but instead it came out the fall after my accident with a different ending. Another example, I was pretty heavy into progressive rock and metal, but Tool did not exist. There was no Transformers reboot or movie. My high school grades were different and I got the option to go into university for engineering when before the accident I had to take a year off to upgrade my math and sciences. It slowed down, but every so often I'll watch a movie on TV and it will be different or I can't put my finger on it. I have no idea what happened, I think I'm from a different universe, or maybe this is the afterlife. I don't know if it was directly connected, but as a kid I lived in a trailer on a sparsely populated road. Lots of forest all around. Its broad side facing the street, I slept in the middle back portion on a raised platform. It had dressers underneath and a mattress on top. The mattress was surrounded by wood on all three sides, but the board under the mattress could be moved so you could get behind the drawers for whatever reason. I also had this tent bed thing that wrapped around the bed and made it so you could only leave the bed by unzipping a set of flaps on either side of the bed, like a real tent. One night I woke up, wanting to go to the bathroom. Trying to get out, and thinking I was facing the one wall, I proceeded to one side of my tent and unzipped it. Placing my hand out, I felt the wall. Okay? I didn't think I tossed in my sleep back then. Sliding my hand downward, I felt the wall continue past my mattress, which was almost always tight to the wall and never moved unless done intentionally. It continued deeper, to the point I couldn't reach all the way. It was sometime around this point I felt freaked out, as any situation might, a young kid, if something just doesn't feel right. But still I decided to turn my body around and try to get down. I had to pee and I think I couldn't get the zipper on the other side to open. That's when I felt it. That something wanted me to drop down. That if I lowered myself any further I was still not going to find the ground. I was taller than the drawers, and I would fall. And it would have me. I got right back into bed, zipped it up and forced myself back to sleep as best I could with a full bladder, until the sun was up. The bed had never moved away from the wall, and I'm certain I wasn't dreaming it.
I've seen the other world that is currently merging with Earth. Right now, places we have that have no grass whatsoever. This other world still have nice-sized patches with a few trees that span entire deserts. The world is entirely vintage in its course. It's a future that should have been and never was. Every day I look around me and it's as if only I can see how weak the veil is becoming. Right now the veil is so weak I almost can't even see parts of my own reality. Yet it's clear other people can. What is happening is that a much higher organism other than humans that control the multiverse is now fully aware of exactly how bad the Earth we are in actually is. This is the real ruler of the Earth. They have noticed that another higher organism other than ourselves actually did a horrible job keeping up with the Earth. Essentially, they are being fired. When one of these higher organisms are fired from their job, many things happen that make very little sense. The first thing is that people leave their house and go to the middle of nowhere just to be with a stranger they never have known, so that stranger may give birth to a child of light. This is essentially the signature that the Prince of the Earth has been dethroned. This is what you see happening right now globally with mass migration. Although you don't see the veil the way I see it, you will slowly begin to see more people who you thought were dead become alive and more whiteouts being spelled whiteout. One day, someone will straight up try to destroy the world and they will vanish with the destruction they tried to create.
In case anyone remembers hearing it somewhere before, this one had previously been featured on Pepe's Choice. Any experiences with waking up in an empty world? Hey X, I am sorry for any formatting errors or anything of that sort, as this is my first time posting here. I feel like I am out of options, and this may be the only place I can get some semblance of an answer. I thought I was doing better, but this weekend I could not stop thinking about this event. I have work tomorrow, and figure that getting it all written out might help me get a few hours of sleep. This all occurred about 6 years ago, the summer I graduated from high school. Me and 3 friends were all going to colleges hours away from each other. So as for final hurrah, we all pitched in and rented a cabin in the Appalachians for a week. It was maybe 10 minutes away from the nearest town, but still surrounded by development. The whole thing was probably more tourist trap than anything, but we didn't care. We planned to spend the days hiking and exploring the nearby towns, then spend the nights shooting the shit and playing Call of Duty Zombies on my buddy's old Xbox 360. We spent the majority of the first day just driving up there, and it was dark by the time we got to the cabin. We set everything up, chose rooms, and played a few rounds of Keno on the TV in the common area. We called it a night a few hours later, and we all planned to get up early the next morning. I want to emphasize that we did not have any drugs of any kind with us. I've tried to tell this story to my parents, and they were convinced that it was nothing more than a bad trip. This was not the case. The next morning, I woke up with my alarm at 7 o'clock. I went downstairs to find I'm the only one up, even though we all agreed to get up at this time. I went to my friend's room and started knocking on his door to try to wake him up. No response. At this point, I am a bit fed up, so open his door and enter. Nothing. The covers of his bed are messed up, like someone had been sleeping in them, and his luggage was here, but he was gone. At this point, I thought that these assholes had just left early. I checked the other two rooms and saw that they were empty as well. Just to be sure they left, I went out to the driveway. The car was still here. I figured that this must just be a part of some joke they decided to pull on me. I walk back in and start yelling from them, telling them to cut the bullshit so we could start hiking. Nothing. No response but my slight echo. I tear through the house trying to find them, but they are not here. At this point, the only spot they could be is the woods out back. I call one of them and hear his phone ring from upstairs. I find it laying on the nightstand next to his bed. Repeat the process and see that all these idiots have left their phones home. I spend about 5 minutes looking for them out there when I notice the woods are quiet. I am by no means a woodsman and spent my entire childhood in the suburbs, but even I could feel that the forest should not be this quiet. There were no birds, none of the summer insects, just the quiet breeze through the trees. I say screw it, and decide that if they want to spend the first morning hiding in the woods to mess with me, I am just going to wait inside. I play some zombies again, but after about 30 minutes passes, I start getting worried. There's no reason for them not to be back by now. I start getting really worried. I write a note telling them that I'm looking for them in the woods, and to call me if they find the note before I find them. 30 minutes in these terrifyingly quiet woods, and still nothing. I have no clue what to do, so I go back to the cabin and call my parents. First, my mom does not answer, then my dad. I then called 911. At the time, it felt like a bit of an overreaction, but I did not know what else to do. The line rings for about 5 minutes, but is never picked up. The only thing I can think of is just to drive into town to try and find help. I search around, take the keys, and head off in my buddy's SUV. I get about 5 minutes down the road when I see some asshole who has his car stopped in the middle of the lane. I swerved around him, only to come across more of these cars, just stopped. Look inside as I pass them, and they are all empty. By the time I am close to the town, the roads are blocked by these empty parked cars, all of them still running. I think this was the moment I realized I was alone. I'm not going to act like that thought never crossed my mind earlier, but this was the first evidence I had of it. I make it into a small town, and it is void of people. There is no one manning the gas station I enter, no one in the diner next door. I break down into tears. How else do you react to this realization? I spent the rest of that day just looking for anything to show that someone was there. Nothing all day. I make my way back to the house and go to sleep, hoping that all of this is some bad nightmare I will wake up from. I don't. By the next morning, I fully believe that I am the last human on Earth. I wish I could say that I had some enlightened response to this realization, but the first thing I did was to try to figure out a game plan. I figure that the most important thing to figure out is the food situation, as I have already stressed, ate my way through half of the food we brought with us. I raided the gas station and the supermarket, and came back with a horde of non-perishable food, bottled water and junk food. I stop by a diner and use a flat-top griddle to try to make some of the canned foods a little more edible. It doesn't work. I spend what I think were about 3 weeks just trying to keep my mind occupied. I can go more into depth about this if any of you are interested. I began to venture farther away from the area we were staying, and began to explore some of the surrounding towns. I spent some nights sleeping in the car, some nights sleeping in motels off the highway. I spent one night in a diner whose walls were covered in Sasquatch posters. There were no animals or bugs around either, but the trees seemed fine. One morning I drive into another small town and step out to take a piss. Here, however, there was a sound. For the first time in days, I hear the sound of a car idling. This was unique, as most of the other cars had all ran out of gas days, if not weeks ago. It is parked outside of a brick building near the outskirts of the town. I approach cautiously and enter the building. Here I see the first human since everyone disappeared. He is at the end of a long hallway, in a room filled with filing cabinets. He is tearing through them, like he is looking for something. I wish I could say that he looked particularly interesting, or was wearing something like a hazmat suit. But honestly, he just looked about as normal as you could be. Mid-40s, slightly overweight, average height man, wearing a rolled-up collared shirt and jeans. I clear my throat to let him know I'm here, and he turns around. He has a normal-looking face with salt and pepper hair and a buzz cut. He sees me and breaks into a smile and says, "You are not anon yet, right?" In an almost joking manner, like he knew the answer would be no. I stare back with a look of confusion, and his expression changes on a dime. He looks partly shocked, partly furious, partly confused, like I just told him I slept with a mom he did not realize he had. He looks into my eyes, and within a second of our gaze meeting, I am bolting upright in bed, at the cabin. I frantically look around and see all my friends are still there. I try to explain to them what happened, but they all make fun of me for being so scared of a nightmare. It wasn't a dream, though. I remember it as vividly as memories, and during it I tried to wake myself up multiple times. All the places I visited were exactly the same out of the dream. I had never been to that Sasquatch diner before, but I convinced my friends to drive over there, and just like in the dream, it was covered in Sasquatch posters, this time with staff running it. The only exception to this was the brick building where I saw the man. We drove through the town, but the building was gone. This pretty much ruined my life. I know that part of this is just my lazy ass trying to make excuses, but I truly feel this way. I don't think my life is real. By any stretch, it feels just as real as that dream. I've dealt with sleep insomnia because of this. I don't sleep well anymore. I have no motivation to keep going in life. I dropped out of college halfway through my first semester, and now work a shit job for shit pay. My parents have paid for therapists, but none of them helped. They all try to convince me I dreamt it all, but I know that is not true. I have given up on therapy. I really hope some of y'all can give me answers. I need them.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.